Welcome to day 22 of 100 Days of VBA. Today we're going to look at maybe not the most exciting topic, but a super important one, and that's error handling. So if you have an error in your code or something happens with some user input that makes something unexpected happen, then it's good to have ways of your code handling that error to make sure that it doesn't just break or crash on a user who doesn't understand what's going on. So we're going to start by defining a function. So let's just say error handling. And in here we're going to have a few variables. So we're going to say dim x as integer, dim y as integer, and then dim result as double. Now a double just means a number with decimal point or a floating point number. So that means we can do an x divided by y sum, for example, and not worry about it having to result in a round number. So let's set x is equal to 10, y is equal to none, and then try and do result as x divided by y. And obviously that's not going to be possible because you can't divide by 0. So let's try and have a message box down here and say result and our result variable. Now let's see what happens if we try and run this. So we get runtime error 11, and 11 is the code for a division by 0 error. So how do we avoid that in case we ever get some input from a user that results in divide by 0 error? First, we add a line at the top of the function saying on error resume next. Now that means that if the program finds an error, then instead of just giving us that error message, it'll actually try and run the next line of code instead. So what we can do after our result, because we know this is the line of code that's going to give us the error, is we can say if error dot number. Now the error means that we can find out if there are any errors in our code. So if the error exists, or if there's a number, in case the code doesn't equal 0, so if it is an error code, in which case we know it's going to be 11, then, so remember our if statement, then we can say message box and error occurred, and then combine that with the description, so we can access our error variable again and find the description, and then we can clear our error and then move on. Of course, because we've got an if, we need an else, and so if there's no error, then we just want to say message box result as we did before. So we'll copy that in, and then we'll end our if like that. There we go. So now, when we run our function, just clear all these spaces, then we get our custom error message, or our message box, instead of an actual error. And if we make that a legitimate sum, then it will tell us the result. So we've handled that error. We've checked if it exists, we've displayed it to the user, we've cleared it so it can carry on, and if there's no error, we still do what we wanted to do originally. Now, another way of doing this, instead of just carrying on, we can say on error GoTo error handler. And error handler is a specific bit of code that we're going to include. So we're going to delete all this for now, and we're going to write back our message box result like this. There we go. And we're going to add exit sub there, which means if there's no error, just run this and then exit. But now what we're going to include further down is our error handler, as we defined up here. So make sure this is exactly the same as this. So we can say error handler colon, and now we're going to have our message box, and we're going to say an error occurred, and as before, we're going to use the dot description, and then we're going to clear the error, and then we still have our end sub afterwards. So now let's run it once with 10 divided by 2, result is 5, and now let's try divide by 0, then we still get our custom error message that we can display to the user. So that's great, but what if we want to have different error messages for different types of error? So in this case, we can use the select function. So if you remember the select before, it's if you have lots of different possible values, you can choose what to happen on each value. So let's say select case error.number. Remember, the number is which type of errors occurred. So in this case, we're going to have 11 because we know it's going to be code 11 divided by 0 error. And in that case, we're going to say message box, and here we can define a custom error message for that. We can say custom error cannot divide by 0. And then we're going to have case else, and in that case we're going to use message box and say error, and again just use our generic error.description. So in case there's any other error types, then we can just cover those using the automatic built-in function. Then we need to end our select, and again we need to clear our error. So there we go. Let's try that one now. So this time we get our custom error message cannot divide by 0. So there we go. We looked at a few different ways we can handle errors. We had on error resume next, so just go to the next line of code. We used on error GoTo to go to a custom set of code down here. And then we used our select case to give different custom error messages depending on which type of error you received.